Be with you. Let us pray. O God, whose glory it is always to have mercy, be gracious to all who have gone astray from your ways, and bring them again with penitent hearts and steadfast faith to embrace and hold fast the unchangeable truth of your word, Jesus Christ, your Son, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Before we get started tonight, I'd just like us to give a round of applause to the Invite, Welcome, and Connect ministry group who worked really hard on the soup and salad and bread tonight. They're looking for new folks to join them in their important work of inviting and welcoming and connecting with new folks who come to our church. So if you're interested in that, look for the epistle that comes out tomorrow, and it's got contact information to get involved with them. But we're very thankful for them doing our work on the dinner tonight. I wanted you to hear, you probably weren't listening because you're probably talking, but that song, that's okay too, by the way. Nobody is judging you on that. But that song that was playing right there at the end is a song by Muddy Waters called 40 Days and 40 Nights. And it's, Muddy Waters was not writing about the season of Lent. I wish he was, but 40 days and 40 nights since my baby left this town is the kickoff. But I can't help but think about 40 days of Lent and the blues, and Muddy Waters writing a song about 40 days and 40 nights. Today we're going to be talking about the blues from a specific geographical region. And as I've gone through this class, in times past, it's always, I tend to focus more on the musical varieties of the blues, and we're going to do that obviously, but the geography of the blues is key and important, and it ties in well with the geography of the Lenten season. And we talked about this last week. What is the geography of the Lenten season? It's the desert, right? 40 days and 40 nights, Jesus could have sung that song. Maybe not like Muddy Waters did, but I don't know, maybe he could have. But but Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. So the blues, the music of the blues comes out of people, but it also comes out of geography as well. And I want to kick us off with a blues tune. And again, I want to say this, I think I probably said this last week too, but next week I'm going to play music that I claim ownership of, meaning that it's from where I'm from. And I don't ever claim to be a great blues musician, but I'm one who loves the blues and will attempt to play a few blues tunes for you, because live music is just as good as listening to the old tunes. So I'm telling you that as I fumble through a couple of blues tunes today, this evening. But the first one I want to play for you is really, to me, one of those wonderful tunes from the region we're going to be discussing today, which is the Mississippi Delta. Thank you, Laura Beth, who's a Mississippian, right? This music has its own flavor and taste. In some ways, it's really one of the birthplaces of the blues as an American form of music. And anyway, this tune is one of three I'm going to attempt to do by Robert Johnson tonight. And we'll talk a little bit about Robert Johnson here shortly. But this is one called Love in Vain Blues. So give me 2 seconds to shift and I'll play it, or attempt to play it for you. Followed her to the station, a suitcase in my hand. Well, I followed her to the station, suitcase in my hand. Well, it's hard to tell, it's hard to tell, when all your love's in vain. Oh, my love's in vain. When the train pulled into the station, looked her in the eye when the train pulled in the station. Ooh, I looked her in the eye. I felt so lonesome, I felt so lonesome, and all I could do was cry. All my love's in vain. When the train left the station, 2 lights on behind. When the train left the station, 2 lights on behind. Well, the blue light was my blues, and the red light was my mind. All my love's in vain. Ooh, oh, Willie Mae. Oh, 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 Willie Mae. Oh, 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 Willie, oh. I was happy with that one. Maybe I'll just end there, not mess up the next 2 songs, but that one's a good one. And a good indication of how meaningful that song is that song has been recorded by other musicians, one group in particular from the 1970s. Anybody remember who took that song, Love in Vain, by Robert Johnson? The Stones, that's exactly right, the Rolling Stones. Did a great version of it. And in some ways, it's hard for me to play that version because I love the version the Stones do. But that's where it came from. And of course, the music we're going to talk about today, of course, is the founding, where rock and roll music comes from, right? So before we jump into the blues and to the Delta region in particular, I just want to go back over some of the stuff we talked about last week. And we talked about the meaning of blues. Blues is a musical genre, and I threw in there originating from the United States, and that's because the blues home is in this country. Much of the blues we'll talk about will go beyond it, but if we're going to talk about the blues with a capital B, we're talking about music of the American South and throughout the country. And the blues, of course, now I put a capital B there, but you could put a lowercase b, I suppose, is a feeling or a state of being and emotion. The blues can be a condition of the heart we talked about last week. The blues can be a form of expression. I left the question mark on there, but I didn't mean to. I think it really is a form of expression to have the blues. The blues originates in a culture, and of course that is the culture of the American South, of the post-slavery era of African-American communities and culture, not just in Mississippi we're going to talk about today, but also in Texas and Louisiana and here in Alabama and Georgia and anywhere that the African-American community was shifted and moved post-Civil War in the midst of all the troubles that followed. The blues originates from those communities. But it also is expressed in unique cultural ways as well. That'll be our discussion over the next few weeks when we talk about the music of the Appalachian region and the music of the desert in Africa and the music in Ireland and in religious communities. A unique cultural expression of some of these other things above: feelings, states of being, emotions, conditions of the heart, forms of expression. And as we talked about last week, the blues is both sacred and secular. Remember, we heard a quote from James Cone, who told us that the blues is secular spiritual music. And I think in the midst of the Lenten season, that's where we are. We're secular people shuffling into the spiritual world and dealing with all the mess that comes along with that. The next slide that we looked at last week was the themes of the season of Lent and their connection to that, the desert and the wilderness. this to me is what I want to talk a little bit more about when we move through the music today, the geography of the blues, because the blues always has some sort of geography that impacts it and affects it. For us in Lent, repenting of sins and penitence, fasting, self-denial, introspection, looking inward to see how your heart is shaped, facing temptations, and of course, longing for God, which to me, a good exercise, and I probably mentioned this last week, is if you want to understand secular spirituals, take the word husband or wife or woman or man or this, that, and the other that someone wants and replace it with God. And within that is the answer to the seat. That's the golden ticket, folks. It's the golden ticket. We're all searching for this, and the blues is an expression of that, and that's why Lent and the blues go so well together. But today, I want to jump back into that music I just played for you, which is the music, the blues of the Mississippi Delta region. Now, again, what does geography mean? Go on to the next slide, please, beautiful assistant. Like Vanna White working with you back there. Usually it's the other way around. Thank you. You got it right now. You got it right. So geography, blues in place, you know. What was Jesus feeling when he was out in the desert? What was the emotions of it? I mean, we tend to think of Jesus as this floating around on air kind of image from some movie from the 1950s. But the personhood of Jesus, the need for Jesus to be both fully human and fully divine. We say that in the Nicene Creed every Sunday. That meant that Jesus had to feel things. If he wasn't longing for something out there in the desert, it would have not been a temptation. And the desert is the location he goes to because the desert enforces all this wildness. You know, it's either called the desert or the wilderness. For us in our American minds, the wilderness is out in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, right? Or maybe down in South America, the Amazon. But wilderness is an expression of the wildness of the desert. And the Mississippi Delta is a region that is full of history and full of physicality and geographical impact and change. Of course, the Mississippi Delta lies between the Mississippi Yazoo River and then the Mississippi River. And within that space, all of that location, which if you want to know my brilliance, this came off Wikipedia, right? But Wikipedia is a good place. It's a good example of the Delta. Is a whole lot of experience of life and flooding. In addition to the dealing with slavery and of ownership and enslavement of people who are oppressed and mistreated and those who are causing that pain and mistreatment. There's also a land that's unpredictable and tricky and sneaky. And of course, the floods of the region, even after the Civil War, become issues that everyone has to face, generally if they're on the poor end of the spectrum. And it feeds into the music of the blues, and it becomes part of the music we hear in the Delta region. And I wanted to play a tune for you that I think really expresses that. And it's a song from a blues musician who was born in Mississippi, even though she liked to claim she was from New Orleans. Because, of course, New Orleans was a good place to be from if you were a musician and you were a performer. But Memphis Minnie, as she was known in the early part of the 20th century, most likely grew up in Mississippi and understood what living on the Delta and the river regions were from. Though if she'd been in New Orleans, she'd had the same experience, right? So Memphis Minnie wrote this wonderful tune that gets picked up again by rock and roll much later. Anybody want to guess what it is? It's made popular by one of those British blues rock bands that will become my favorite band of all time, which is Led Zeppelin. And this is a song that they picked up and took, but I'm going to run out of batteries. All right, I need batteries now, sir. Well, I'm not going to play that. Oh, yeah, I can play it for you. I got another microphone. I hope it doesn't run out of batteries. Here's a little bit of Memphis Minnie singing When the Levee Breaks. I said it was going to work. There we go. Little Memphis Minnie and the When the Levee Breaks, which speaks to the struggle of living in the physicality of the Delta. The area of the Delta also can be ascribed to the desert as a place of spiritual life. I mean, within the midst of the hardest places is often where the Spirit comes to be. One of the things in one of those earlier slides of the themes of Lent was an image of the monastery that's been built on the Mount of the Temptation, which is in the Holy Land right outside of the city of Jericho. And it's an area where, of course, tradition, Jesus didn't put a marker on there and say, this is where it happened. But it's where tradition tells us the temptation happens. And so the monastery is built there, and people go there to get into the bare bones of life and discover their spirit. But there's also the struggle that comes from temptation. And the wilderness is a place of struggling with the temptations that have come to be. And the blues is loaded with that. And the temptations include the temptations of our sexuality, of our seeking the things that we lustfully desire. It comes from the sense of the things we need and want that the earth provides. I mean, these are all the images that Jesus gets tempted with in his temptation in the books of Matthew, the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. But there's also the image of the devil that's there. And the interesting thing about the blues and the Delta is that the devil makes his appearance quite often. And often he makes his appearance at the place of the crossroads. And so in order to keep with that theme, before we talk any more about it, I'm going to attempt to play you, for the first time I've ever done it, Robert Johnson's Crossroad Blues. So, because this is where Robert Johnson's mythos begins, and it's where the Delta's mythos begins, because within the idea of the blues and what the blues brings about, Saturday nights at the juke joint before Sunday mornings, dancing, dancing, you know what dancing's all about, right? And the blues musicians who bring about that get ascribed to being from the devil. So this is, of course, something when I was, a younger kid, I thought you had to be a rock and roller to be a devil worshiper. But the blues itself is acclaimed as the devil's music early on because of what it touches in those temptations of the desert. And in the Mississippi Delta, they had their own struggles with it. So let me attempt to play for you Robert Johnson's Crossroads Blues. Musicians have to talk while they tune their instruments, so I will chat with you a little bit about this tune as I tune for you guitar players to open G. You didn't have to talk that much. That was pretty good. If you play long enough, you can tune a guitar really quickly. I went to the crossroad mercy, say, poor Bob, if you please. Ooh, stand at the crossroads, I tried to flag a ride. Ooh, stand at the crossroads, I tried to flag a ride. Nobody seemed to know me there, everybody passed me by. Ooh, sun going down, boys, not gonna catch me here. Ooh, sun going down, boys, not gonna catch me here. I ain't got no loving sweet woman yet, oh, to feed my care. Well, you can run, tell my friend Bo Willie Brown. Well, you can run, tell my friend Bo Willie Brown. I'm standing at the crossroad, babe, well, I believe I've sank down. Thank you, Lord. I'm glad to get that one done. I love that song, and it's you know, I've wanted to play it, so you guys get to hear it for the first time, and it's my attempt at it. And Robert Johnson will that song, of course, is more about the struggles of being an African-American man in his time frame. Waiting at the crossroads, trying to flag a ride. Nobody seems to know me, everybody passed me by. Sun going down, darkness going to catch me here. I can tell you right now, Robert Johnson wasn't worried about the devil with the dark going down in the Delta of Mississippi in his time frame in the 1920s, 1930s. It was a different color devil he was worried about. That idea of crossroads gets tied into the temptations and struggle of Robert Johnson. We have the image of Jesus in his temptation. And I just found this image today when I was Googling around on Google. You Google around on Google, right? Yeah. Beautiful image of Jesus in his temptation. And then the story of Robert Johnson gets tied into a temptation to be a great blues musician. And going out on the crossroads, which is part of a general folk tradition of meeting up with the devil and trading your soul for the ability to play the guitar. I find it really bad discussion about Robert Johnson is having to say that he went off and sold his soul to the devil to play the music that he played. Now, I'll tell you, it doesn't come from our modern ideas about the blues as much as it comes from early folk musicians like Son House, who knew Robert Johnson, and others who described him as being a terrible musician at one point, going away, disappearing for a year or something, and suddenly coming back and being incredible. And of course, there is a possibility he just played and played and played and played until he mastered it. But it was much more exciting to give a sense of Robert Johnson as the one who goes to the crossroads and sells his soul to the devil. So, and there's loads of images of this throughout the blues. Last week I mentioned Petey Wheatstraw, played a song for you about Petey Wheatstraw. Petey Wheatstraw learned that if the church was going to call blues musicians the devil, they could make some money off of it. So Petey Wheatstraw called himself the devil's son-in-law. Robert Johnson will pick up several pieces of music and he'll build off of this, attach himself to it, and play into it. But what Robert Johnson sings about his encounters with the devil in music is a little different from Petey Wheatstraw's version. Robert Johnson seems to place it within this struggle and temptation that to me makes Robert Johnson one of the great blues musicians for a discussion about the season of Lent. I'm going to play you a brief portion of, Go one more forward, Audrey, please. This is the images we have of Robert Johnson, only 3. There's a 4th photo out there that some people think might be of Robert Johnson, but these are definitely him, and only 3 of them are in existence. So the mystery of Robert Johnson, he only records, one of you blues fans out there tell me, he only records, I think, 28 songs, something like that. That's all we have of his music. He went to Dallas and recorded his music there, and it came out and was released, and the story goes that, I can't remember, it might have been John Hammond Sr. heard the music, went to find Robert Johnson and get him into the studios more and take him around, and discovered that Robert Johnson had died and was gone. So the mystery of the blues and Robert Johnson are all intertwined together, and to me they fit perfectly with that image of temptation in our Lenten struggles. And again, they fit in well because Robert Johnson was struggling. I want to let you hear a song that I wish I could play that is one of his great tunes called Hellhound on My Trail. And again, is he playing into the sense of his selling his soul with the devil, or is he giving us a sense of the struggle one has in temptation and what comes out of that when you fall into temptation and you let yourself go into it? Because if there's one thing there's no question about is Robert Johnson liked his ladies. And more than likely, the story goes, he was murdered through poison by the husband of a woman that he spent a little bit too much time with. And again, to have recorded only the songs he has, he speaks to his life. Whether or not he did that or not, he speaks to the story and feeds into it. So listen to just a smidge. It's only 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You can listen to the whole thing. Listen to the poetry of what Robert Johnson is writing about in this song, Hellhound on My Trail.
I got to keep moving, I got to keep moving. Blood falling down like hail, blood falling down like hail. Blood falling down like hail, blood falling down like hail. And the day keeps on running. The hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail, hellhound on my trail. If the day was Christmas Eve, if the day was Christmas Eve, and tomorrow was Christmas Day. If the day was Christmas Eve, and tomorrow was Christmas Day. Oh, when we have a time, baby. Oh, I would need my little sweet ride just to pass the time away. Pass the time away. You think I'm hard foot bottom around my door, all around my door. You think I'm hard foot bottom around your daddy door. And keep me with around in my right on. Every old place I go, every old place I go. I can tell the wind rising, the leaves standing on the tree, standing on the tree. I can tell the wind rising, leaves standing on the tree. All I need, my little sweet woman, and to keep my company, my company.
Robert Johnson's Hellhounds on My Trail. And to me, it's a perfect example of a song that could easily take out the word rider, all I need is my little sweet rider, and replace that word with God, the longing for something. The blues is falling down like rain. I can feel the leaves trembling on the trees. I've got a hellhound on my trail. I mean, it's not a sense of someone who goes off to the crossroads to sell his soul, as more as one of us regular human beings struggling through life and trying to find what could bring us the happiness that we seek. And to me, that's the interesting part about mixing the blues with the Lenten season. I'm going to play another one for my last piece of Delta Blues, another tune that Robert Johnson wrote that's called Me and the Devil. Another song that anybody who knows the myth of Robert Johnson, the story of him selling his soul, will hold up as proof. Listen to this song. He's talking about the devil. But listen to the words of this song and see what you pick up out of this sense of longing and struggle that Robert Johnson is dealing with. I'm going to try to leave this microphone on and see if it will stay on while I play over here. Hold on. And yet again, you get to see the mastery of my quick tingle. Voila! Tune. It's called Me and the Devil Blues. Early this morning, he knocked upon my door. Early this morning, he locked upon my door. And I said, hello, Satan, I believe it's time to go. Me and the devil were walking side by side. Me and the devil, were walking side by side. I'm gonna keep my woman till I get satisfied. She says she don't see why she be dog me round. Oh, you know you ain't been treating me right. She says she don't see why she be dog me round. It must be that old evil spirit way deep down in the ground. And they buried my body down by the highway side. Baby, I don't care where you bury my body when I'm dead and gone. And bury my body down by the highway side. So my old evil spirit to catch a Greyhound bus and ride. Little Robert Johnson. So, again, deals with the devil or struggles with the devil. I mean, the thing I'll leave you with is, as we wrap this session up, is the struggles in the Delta Blues, in the geography of the Mississippi Delta, are full of temptations and worries about floods and natural disasters, and about the life that surrounds the blues man. And it's a perfect example still, I mean, not on the level that they ever dealt with, that we don't deal with what they had to deal with, but of our own spiritual struggles longing for God. Because again, to me, all of these songs are stories of people who are seeking and searching. So I have a Bible verse that I'll leave you with. I picked it out years ago, so we'll see if it has any connection today with us. I think it does. But it's a passage that most of us are familiar with from the Gospel of Luke. Jesus said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you?" There's a struggle of the blues. Why do we sing the blues? Because we don't do what the Lord tells us to do. I will show you what someone is like who comes to me, hears my words, and acts on them. That one is like a man, a person, building a house who dug deeply and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood arose, the river burst against the house that could not shake it, because it has been well built. But the one who hears and does not act is like one who built a house on the ground without a foundation. When the river burst against it, immediately it fell, and great was the ruin of that house. Now, we talked in our Bible study today about how our 21st century material minds automatically really think of those who have the ability. Well, who has the ability to build a good house on solid foundation? No wonder the flood doesn't knock their house down. Again, Jesus is not really an architect telling us how to build a physical home. He's talking about a spiritual home that's being built based on his word. And the answer, the golden ticket to the blues, or how we deal with the blues, is in this listening to God and following God. And of course, the Lenten season, it forces us to look inwardly at ourselves, to struggle with the temptations we face. The blues songs you and me could write that may be a little more risky than Robert Johnson ever wrote. How we deal with those and find our way out of that desert and into a strong foundation in the Word of God. And again, that's the struggle of the secular spirituals and the sacred spiritual. Is the movement is from one to the other, and we often fall back into one and go back up into the other. And the Lenten season is always there to remind us of the blues and give us a sense of how we walk through the wilderness, the desert, the delta, and find our way to the other side of it, which of course for us in the Christian tradition is what happens to us on Easter. I've got one more slide, and that is of a place I like to visit someday, which is the spot of the burial of Robert Johnson. Now, again, even this, there's at least 2 possible locations of his burial. No one really knows, but this is the one I'll probably go to because it's got a cool guitar sitting in front of it. It looks kind of like my guitar, doesn't it? But this is one of his locations of burial. And again, you can see the dates on that. 1911 to 1938 was a short amount of time for one of the great bluesmen of the past century, probably of all time. But a little bit of the blues. What'd you say?
Where is that?
That's a good question. If I'd done a good job of preparing, I could have told you where this one is. Somewhere near Clarksdale. Where's Laura Beth? She may very well know more than I know. But somewhere near Clarksdale, Mississippi. Yeah, down in the Delta. So in that general location. All right. Well, I'm going to leave you with one more song because why not? It's 7:15. This is a completely different tune. That's why I brought a second guitar. My wife said, "Why are you bringing 2 guitars?" And I thought, "Why might I play this one?" This one, just like last week's Richard Thompson. Where is Richard? Not that Richard Thompson, but the other Richard Thompson. He's going to play with me. That's right, Richard Thompson. Come on up. No. This song is by another musician. And again, the question is it the blues? Listen to the song and the way it's sung. And I think it's a good prep for us next week when we move from the Delta into another geographic region, which is the Southern Mountains. And I grew up there. It was rough in some of those places. Not too far from here, right?
Right.
So we'll talk about that. Here's a little bit of a tune most of you will probably know. Again, one of my favorite American bluesmen. Robert Zimmerman.
All right.
Also known as Bob Dylan. If you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the rivers freeze and the summer rains, remember me to one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. And if you're traveling when the snowflakes fall, when the wind blows heavy on the borderline, Please see for me that her coat's so warm to keep her from the howling winds. Please see for me that her hair's hanging long, that it rolls and flows all down her breasts. Please see for me that her hair's hanging long, 'cause that's the way I remember her best. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers me at all. So many times I've often prayed in the darkness of my night and in the brightness of my day. So if you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the wind blows heavy on the borderline, please look for me, one I love. She's the one that I remember best. See you next week.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.